Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're tackling a connection, one that you specifically asked about,
Okay.
and that's the link between autism and minimalism.
Interesting.
Yeah, and you mentioned you're interested in learning more about managing sensory input,
Yeah.
especially as an adult woman.
Right.
So we're going to be looking at this blog post titled "Autism and Minimalism: A Perfect Match."
Okay.
I have to admit, when I first saw this, I was like, "What? How could these two things possibly go together?"
Yeah, it is one of those things that, at first glance, it seems a little counterintuitive.
Right.
But when you really start to understand, how the autistic brain experiences the world,
Yeah.
it starts to make a lot of sense.
So tell me a little bit more about that. What is it about the way the brain works that makes this connection click?
Well, for many autistic individuals, the world can just feel like this constant barrage of sensory information.
Oh,
Imagine your brain trying to process like a million things at once.
Yeah.
Sights and sounds, smells, textures, all competing for attention. It's kind of like a computer trying to run too many programs simultaneously.
Right.
Eventually, it just starts to overheat and lag.
So it's not just about being, a little picky about certain fabrics or sounds.
Right.
It's like a whole different way of experiencing the world.
Yeah.
Almost like the volume is turned way up on everything.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's where minimalism comes in.
Okay.
You can think of it as a way to kind of turn down the volume on all of that sensory input.
Okay.
By simplifying your environment, you're essentially creating a space where your brain can finally relax and breathe.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
I've definitely felt that sense of calm, when I've decluttered my own space.
Right.
But I never connected it to how the autistic brain works.
Yeah, it's a connection that a lot of people miss.
Yeah.
But it can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
The blog post highlights how clutter in particular can be a major trigger for sensory overload.
Oh, really?
So for someone with these heightened sensitivities, a cluttered room can feel like an assault on the senses.
It's almost like every object is screaming for your attention.
Yes, exactly.
Right? And if you're already struggling to filter out all that sensory input, it's no wonder it leads to, anxiety and just feeling overwhelmed.
Exactly, precisely.
Yeah.
Now imagine swapping that chaotic environment for a minimalist space.
Okay.
Clean lines, minimal decorations, everything in its place.
Yeah.
Suddenly there's so much less to process.
Right.
And the brain can finally just focus on what matters.
I'm starting to see how that could be so freeing, almost like taking off a weighted vest
Yeah.
that you didn't even realize you were wearing.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And the beauty of minimalism is that it's not just about the aesthetics,
Right.
It's really about creating a space that truly supports your well-being.
Yeah.
And for someone on the spectrum, that can mean the difference between feeling constantly overwhelmed and finally feeling at peace.
This is already making so much sense. Okay. So we've established that minimizing sensory input can be like a game changer
Yeah.
for autistic individuals.
Absolutely.
But what about some of the other benefits that are mentioned in this blog post? It talks about things like improved focus and productivity.
Yeah.
How does that tie in?
Well, imagine you're trying to work on some complex task, right?
Okay.
But your desk is covered in papers. Your computer screen is cluttered with tabs.
Oh, yeah.
Your phone keeps buzzing with notifications.
Oh, tell me about it.
It's a recipe for distraction.
I'm terrible for that. My workspace often looks like a tornado hit it.
Yeah. But for someone with autism who might already struggle with executive functioning and attention,
Right.
that kind of environment can be completely debilitating.
Oh, wow.
It's like trying to solve a math problem while someone's blasting music in your ear.
Wow. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
So in a minimalist space with fewer visual distractions and less, digital clutter,
Right.
it would be so much easier to actually focus on the task at hand.
Exactly. And when you can focus, your productivity naturally increases.
Makes sense.
You're not wasting time searching for things or getting sidetracked by every little ping and notification.
Right.
The blog post even mentions that some autistic individuals find that minimalism helps them manage their time more effectively, which again ties back to that, improved executive functioning.
That's fascinating. So it's not just about like having a tidy house.
Yeah.
It's about actually creating a space that supports your brain's ability to function at its best.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And that improved brain function, can lead to a greater sense of mental clarity.
Yeah.
That feeling of having your thoughts organized.
Yeah.
And being able to make decisions without feeling overwhelmed.
That sounds amazing. Almost like decluttering your mind along with your space.
Exactly. And this is where it starts to get really interesting, especially when we consider the listener's interest in autism and women.
Okay, you mentioned women and autism. So what's the connection to minimalism there?
Well, women are often underdiagnosed or diagnosed later in life. And one theory is that, they're better at masking their autistic traits,
Right.
adapting to social expectations that might not feel natural to them.
Yeah.
And, masking takes a lot of energy.
I can imagine.
It can be utterly exhausting.
Yeah, it's like putting on a performance every day, trying to fit in when your brain is wired differently.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Some researchers believe that autistic women may gravitate towards minimalism as an unconscious coping mechanism.
Wow.
It's like their intuition guides them to create an environment that reduces sensory overload and supports their well-being.
So they're almost self-medicating with minimalism without even realizing it.
It's a fascinating possibility, isn't it?
It is.
Think about it. A woman who's always felt overwhelmed by too many choices.
Yeah.
Too much visual clutter, too much noise.
Right.
She might instinctively declutter her home, streamline her wardrobe, or stick to a predictable routine.
Right.
All things that align beautifully with minimalist principles.
It's like her brain is saying, okay, I need some breathing room here. Let's simplify things.
Precisely.
Right.
And then maybe later in life, she receives an autism diagnosis,
Uh-huh.
and suddenly all these seemingly random preferences start to make sense.
That must be such a validating experience. Like, finally, there's an explanation for why certain things feel so right,
Yes.
even if you couldn't articulate it before.
Absolutely. And this understanding can be incredibly empowering.
Yeah.
Because once you know what your brain needs to thrive,
Right.
you can start making conscious choices to support those needs.
So it's not just about decluttering your space. It's about decluttering your life in a way that aligns with your neurodiversity.
Exactly. It's about designing a life that feels authentic and supportive, rather than constantly trying to fit into a mold that doesn't quite match.
Okay, this is all starting to click for me, but let's get practical for a moment.
Sure.
If someone's listening to this and feeling totally inspired to embrace minimalism, where do they even begin?
Yeah.
It can feel so overwhelming, especially if you're already struggling with sensory overload.
That's a great point. And the blog post emphasizes that it's essential to start small.
Okay.
Don't try to KonMari your entire house in a weekend.
Right.
Choose one area, maybe your bedside table or a single kitchen drawer.
Okay, that feels manageable.
Yeah.
So what's the next step? Do I just chuck everything out?
Not necessarily. It's about being mindful and intentional with your choices.
Okay.
Look at each item and ask yourself, do I use this regularly? Does it bring me joy? Does it serve a purpose in my life right now?
And if the answer is no,
Then consider letting it go, donate it, sell it.
Mhm.
Or if it's truly broken or unusable, recycle it responsibly.
okay.
But here's the key. Don't force yourself to get rid of something if it holds sentimental value.
Right.
Or if you're just not ready to part with it yet.
So it's about honoring your own feelings and not getting caught up in some rigid set of minimalist rules.
Exactly. Remember, this is about creating a space that supports your well-being.
Right.
Not adding more stress to your life.
This is all making so much sense. But what about all the digital clutter?
Mhm.
My inbox alone gives me anxiety.
Ah, yes. The digital realm.
Yeah.
That's a whole other deep dive.
Right.
But the same principles apply. Unsubscribe from emails you never open.
Okay.
Delete apps you don't use. Turn off those pesky notifications.
So it's like creating a minimalist sanctuary, not just in your physical space,
Yeah.
but in your digital life as well.
Exactly. And this brings us to the concept of mindful consumption,
Okay.
which the blog post highlights.
Okay.
It's about shifting your mindset from wanting more to appreciating what you already have.
I love that it's about focusing on needs versus wants, being more conscious of what you bring into your life, both physically and digitally.
Precisely. And that shift in perspective can have a ripple effect on so many areas of your life.
It sounds like it could be incredibly freeing both for your mind and your space. But, as we've been talking about decluttering our physical and digital lives, I've been thinking, what about mental clutter? All those thoughts and worries swirling around in our heads.
Yeah.
Can we apply minimalist principles to our inner world as well?
Now you're thinking like a true minimalist.
I don't know about that.
It's a fantastic question, and one that I think deserves more exploration.
Okay.
We've spent a lot of time talking about how our physical and digital environments can impact our well-being,
Right.
especially for those on the spectrum.
Right.
But what about our mental landscape?
I'm picturing it like those junk drawers we all have.
Yeah.
Just a jumbled mess of to-do lists, anxieties, unfinished projects, and that one nagging thought that just keeps circling back.
Exactly, and just like physical clutter can lead to sensory overload, and overwhelmed mental clutter can do the same.
Oh, wow.
It can make it difficult to focus, to drain our energy, and even impact our mood and sleep.
So if minimalism is about simplifying and creating a sense of calm in our physical space, could it also help us cultivate that same sense of peace within our own minds?
That's the idea. And there are actually a number of practices that align beautifully with minimalist principles that can help us declutter our minds.
Interesting. Like what?
Things like mindfulness meditation,
Okay.
journaling, and even setting boundaries can all be incredibly powerful.
Okay, tell me more about how those practices connect to minimalism.
Well, mindfulness meditation, for example, is all about being present in the moment.
Okay.
Letting go of distracting thoughts and simply observing your breath and your body.
Yeah.
It's like creating a quiet, minimalist space within your own mind.
So instead of getting swept away by, a torrent of worries,
Right.
you're creating a space for calm and stillness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And journaling can be a powerful way to process and release those thoughts and emotions that are cluttering up your mental space.
Right.
It's like taking out the mental trash, so to speak.
That makes so much sense. It's like decluttering your mind by putting all those thoughts down on paper where they can be examined and released.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And setting boundaries is another crucial aspect of mental minimalism.
Okay.
It's about being mindful of what you allow into your mental space.
Right.
Saying no to commitments that drain you, limiting your exposure to negative news, and being selective about who you spend your time with, all of these can help create a more peaceful and supportive mental environment.
It's like creating a filter for your mind, letting in the positive and blocking out the negative.
I love that.
It's a powerful concept, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's especially important for those on the spectrum
All right.
who may be more sensitive to external stimuli and emotional overload.
This has been so eye-opening. It's amazing how these principles of minimalism can be applied not just to our homes and our digital lives, but to our inner worlds as well.
It really speaks to the versatility and power of this concept.
Yeah.
Minimalism is ultimately about being intentional with your choices, about what you surround yourself with, how you spend your time, and what you allow into your mind. It's about creating a life that feels aligned with your values and your needs, both internal and external.
Exactly. And that's a journey that looks different for everyone.
Yeah.
There's no one-size-fits-all approach.
So to wrap this up, what's the biggest takeaway for our listener today?
I think the key message is this minimalism is about so much more than just getting rid of stuff.
Right.
It's about simplifying your life, being intentional with your choices,
Yeah.
and creating a space, both physical and mental,
Uh-huh.
that truly supports your well-being.
Remember, it's a journey, not a destination.
Absolutely.
Start small, be kind to yourself,
Mhm.
and experiment with different practices to find what works best for you.
Exactly.
And who knows, you might just discover that minimalism is the key to unlocking a greater sense of peace, focus, and joy in your life.
I think so.
I love it. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the unexpected connection between autism and minimalism. We hope you found it insightful and inspiring.
Absolutely. And remember, the journey to a more mindful and minimalist life starts with a single step.
I like that.
So why not take that step today?
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
Yeah.